Welcome, MSOM 602. Welcome to the first day of class. Coming to you today from a real boring location, just my office. I've actually been home now for about 6 weeks and I'm starting to get the nervous shakes. But I'll be home, I guess for the first 5 weeks of this course, and then the last 2 weeks you might get some exciting locations. My wife and I will be going to Europe for about 6 weeks here coming up. So I promise by the end of the course you'll get something a little bit more exciting than a white wall and me in a lineup. Okay. I just wanted to welcome you to the first day of class, MSOM 602, and talk about Module 1 coming up this week. Just encourage you to get an early start this week and make sure that you're focused on the readings and other things. Make sure too that you look at the announcements that I've already placed in the course. I've given, since most of you this will be your second course with me, you already have 7 weeks of experience with me. You understand how I look at papers, how I make sure that the papers are formatted properly, how I use announcements and all those things. That doesn't change from course to course with me. It'll be the same. So just hearken back on your prior experience in my class and you will do well. All right. So this week, discussion 1 is typical for these courses. You will have an introduction that you need to provide a detailed introduction of yourself. Make sure that your initial post is in by Thursday, and then you have to respond to a minimum of 2 of your fellow classmates' posts by Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. And then, as usual in the first week, the first module of each course, you have another discussion board. This one talks about vision. It talks about vision statements. Having an effective vision statement will help provide a very clear foundation for organizations as they move forward. It will be those things that, as you build on that over time, you'll say, okay, we ought to do this, right? And then the first thing that good companies do is they make sure that the activity that they're proposing is in concert with the vision of the company. If it's not, then you don't do it. If it is, then you consider it. Doesn't mean you do it, but it just means that it meets that consideration. And so I'm asking you to go out and find some vision statements for a company. Perhaps it's the one that you work for, and share it, and then share why it's a good vision statement, why it is something that is appropriate for that particular company. Okay, so that's the second discussion question for Module 1. The assignment this week talks about high-performing organizations. I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, you want an organization that is not just wallowing around. I mean, you want to have something that is performing at a high level. And so Blanchard talks about in your readings this week about high-performing organizations and what are the characteristics of organizations that are high-performing. He also brings up a concept called the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line. I expect you to go out and do some research on this one because you're going to find some information on this one out in your research vehicles. The triple bottom line, very, very important. Now, you're going to see some differences in the way that people interpret this. So some of your research that you do on this may not match up exactly with the concepts that Blanchard's talking about. But in essence, it talks about performing well for employees, performing well for your customers, and then performing well for your investors in those areas. What you may find in some of your readings talks about environmental issues or socially responsible issues that are out there. Include those as well, and just understand that just because Blanchard has 3 things that he talks about doesn't necessarily make other things not good to consider, okay? So I would encourage you to make sure that you look at that a little in depth. And then Blanchard likes to use these, what do they call them, acronyms or something like that. So he talks about a scores model. And so what I want you to do is to take a look at the scores model and provide some details in your paper about that this week. remember the formats that I need to have you use on papers. If you have any questions about that, go to the announcements. I have a sample APA paper provided for you in one of the announcements. And then finally this week will be your first memo exercise. I talked about this in the Welcome to the Course video. So make sure that if you haven't watched that, make sure you review that. But memo exercises are just simply interoffice memos where you are putting out a memo to your employees. Don't use sources, don't use citations, all those things, because it's a conversation between you and your employees. And so what I'm asking you to do on this one is to develop a vision statement for a company, for your department, for something. And then communicate it to your people. And then talk to them and say, here's why this is important. Here's why I selected this. Here's why we need to make sure that we focus on this in particular. And so I'll be interested to see, and again, the purpose on these memo exercises is so that you can take a concept that you're learning and put it into real honest-to-goodness employee speak, if you will, to communicate it to your people. And my hope is that as we go through these, that you'll develop a language that you'll be able to say, okay, here is a heady concept about vision statements and all of those technical things, but here is how I'm going to communicate it to the people who work for me. Okay? So my hope is that the application works as you go forward in those areas. All right? I am going to be going to my folks this week in Missouri, but again, that's just here in the States, so nothing tremendously exciting about going to Missouri, right? But nevertheless, I am totally accessible, and I hope you get off to a great start this week. Don't wait too long. Jump in, and let's have fun the next few weeks, all right? Take care.